"Sheila, you're not coming to the wedding." My sister Victoria said it so casually, like she was telling me she'd run out of milk. We were sitting in her apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, the place she'd moved to 3 years ago for what she called a fresh start. I'd driven 6 hours to see her, expecting we'd finally talk about her upcoming wedding, maybe go dress shopping or at least look at invitations together. Instead, she wouldn't even let me see a picture of her fiancé. "What do you mean I'm not coming?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Vicky, I'm your sister." She didn't look at me, just kept folding laundry on her couch, her hands moving in quick, nervous motions. "It's better this way, trust me." "Better? How is excluding me from your wedding better?" "You wouldn't understand." She grabbed another shirt from the basket, snapping it in the air before folding it. "Besides, it's going to be small, very intimate, just his family and a few close friends." "I'm not close?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Vicky, we grew up sharing a bedroom. I held your hair back when you had food poisoning sophomore year. I helped you move to this city, and now you're telling me I can't watch you get married?" She finally looked at me, and something in her eyes made my stomach drop. Fear. My sister was afraid of something. "It's complicated, Sheila." "Then explain it to me." "I can't." She turned away again, busying herself with the laundry. "Please just respect my decision. I need you to stay away from the wedding. From him." "From him? You won't even tell me his name." "It's better if you don't know." I sat there on her couch, watching my younger sister shut me out of the most important day of her life, and I felt something crack inside my chest. We'd never been like this. Even when our parents died in that car accident 5 years ago, we'd clung to each other. I was 22, she was 19, and suddenly we were alone in the world except for each other. I'd put my graduate school plans on hold to make sure she finished college. We'd promised each other we'd always be there for the important moments. And now this. "Is he making you say this?" I asked quietly. "Because if someone's forcing you to cut me out..." "No one's forcing me to do anything." But her voice wavered. "Sheila, please, just let this go. For both our sakes." "Both our sakes? What does that even mean?" She didn't answer, just kept folding clothes like I wasn't even there. I left her apartment that afternoon feeling like I'd lost something I couldn't name. The drive back to my place in Raleigh was a blur of questions I couldn't answer. Why would Victoria push me away like this? What was she so afraid of? And why did mentioning her fiancé make her hands shake? My name is Sheila Patterson, and I'm 27 years old. I work as a graphic designer for a marketing firm called Bright Rise Systems. And up until that conversation with my sister, I thought my life was pretty straightforward. I had a decent apartment, a good job, a small circle of friends. Nothing exciting, but stable. Safe. Victoria was the adventurous one. She'd always been braver than me, more willing to take risks. After our parents died, I watched her transform from a grieving teenager into someone determined to live life on her own terms. She'd moved to Charlotte for a job in hotel management, something she said would let her travel and meet interesting people. I'd been happy for her. But this secretive, fearful version of my sister, I didn't recognize her. For 2 weeks after that visit, I tried calling her every day. Most of the time, she didn't answer. When she did, the conversations were brief and strained. She'd tell me she was fine, that work was busy, that wedding planning was stressful. She never mentioned the fiancé's name, never invited me to meet him. Finally, I did something I'm not proud of. I called her friend Kelsey, someone Victoria had known since college who still lived in Charlotte. "Kelsey, have you met Victoria's fiancé?" I asked, trying to sound casual. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No, actually. She's been really weird about him. Won't bring him around anyone." "Does that seem strange to you?" "Honestly, Yeah. I mean, I've known Vicky for 7 years. This isn't like her at all. She usually can't stop talking about guys she's dating. But this one, it's like he doesn't exist except to her. After I hung up, I sat in my living room and stared at my phone. Something was very wrong. My sister was hiding something, or someone was making her hide something. Either way, I couldn't just stand by and watch her disappear into a marriage with a man who seemed to want her isolated from everyone who cared about her. That's when I made my decision. If Victoria wouldn't let me meet her fiancé, I'd find him myself. 3 days later, I called in sick to work and drove back to Charlotte. I parked down the street from Victoria's apartment building at 7 in the morning, armed with coffee and a plan that probably qualified as stalking, but I didn't care anymore. Something in my gut told me my sister needed help, even if she wouldn't admit it. I'd been sitting in my car for 2 hours when Victoria finally emerged from her building. She was wearing a navy blue dress I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked professional, polished, and terribly alone as she walked to her car. I waited until she pulled out of the parking lot, then followed at what I hoped was a discreet distance. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I'd never followed anyone before, and I kept imagining her spotting me and confronting me. But she seemed lost in her own thoughts, never checking her mirrors more than normal. She didn't go to work. Instead, she drove to an upscale coffee shop in the Dilworth neighborhood, parked, and went inside. I watched through the window as she ordered something and then sat at a corner table, checking her phone every few seconds like she was waiting for someone. 20 minutes later, a man walked in. I couldn't see his face clearly from where I sat in my car across the street, but I could see Victoria's reaction. She stood up quickly, almost knocking over her coffee. The man said something, and she nodded, then gathered her things. They left together, walking to a black SUV parked nearby. I followed them again, my heart pounding now. They drove to a real estate office on Providence Road. I watched them go inside together, the man's hand on the small of Victoria's back in a gesture that looked possessive rather than affectionate. I waited in the parking lot, trying to piece together what I was seeing. Were they looking at houses? Was this wedding planning? But why would she hide something as mundane as house hunting from me? They came out 40 minutes later carrying folders and papers. Victoria was smiling, but it was the kind of smile I recognized from when she was younger and trying to pretend everything was fine. The man opened her car door for her, kissed her cheek, then got into his own vehicle. As he turned to drive away, his face finally caught the light. Everything inside me went cold. I knew that face. I knew it because I'd seen it in 100 news articles 3 years ago. I knew it because it had haunted my nightmares for months after I'd read about what he'd done. His name was Garrett. 3 years ago, Garrett had been engaged to a woman named Christina. The story had made national news. Christina had died in what was initially ruled a suspicious accident at their home. She'd fallen down the stairs and broken her neck, but the more investigators looked into it, the more questions emerged. Neighbors reported hearing arguments. Christina's friends said she'd been planning to leave him. Her diary, found after her death, contained entries describing escalating control and manipulation. But there wasn't enough physical evidence. No witnesses to the actual fall. The case had fallen apart in court, and Garrett had walked away a free man. The prosecutors had called it one of the most frustrating cases they'd ever handled. Everyone believed he'd killed her. They just couldn't prove it. I sat in my car, shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I pulled up the old news articles just to be sure, comparing the photos to the man I'd just seen. Same sharp jawline, same cold eyes, same smile that never quite reached those eyes. It was definitely him. My sister was engaged to a man who had most likely murdered his previous fiancé. Suddenly everything made sense. Victoria's secrecy, her fear, the way she'd begged me to stay away. Either she knew who he was and was trapped somehow, or she had no idea she was dating a killer. I needed to find out which. For the next week, I became obsessed. I took more sick days, spent hours in coffee shops with my laptop, digging through everything I could find about Garrett. I learned his full name was Garrett Sullivan. After Christina's death, he'd disappeared from Colorado, where they'd lived. Apparently, he'd resurfaced in Charlotte about 2 years ago, working in real estate investment. I found Christina's family's website, a memorial page they'd created. Her sister had written a heartbreaking post about how justice had failed them, how a killer was walking free. I reached out to her through the contact form, explaining who I was and what I'd discovered. She called me within an hour. "Your sister is in danger," Christina's sister Jennifer told me, her voice tight with urgency. "Garrett is a master manipulator. Christina didn't realize what he was until it was too late. He isolated her from everyone who loved her, made her think she needed only him. By the time she tried to leave, he'd already taken control of her finances, her social life, everything." "Did she try to get help?" "She tried. But she was scared. He'd never hit her, never left visible marks. It was all psychological. Control disguised as love. And then one day, she fell down the stairs." Jennifer's voice broke. "Please, don't let him do to your sister what he did to mine." I promised Jennifer I'd do everything I could. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment and tried to figure out my next move. I couldn't just call Victoria and tell her she was marrying a murderer. She'd already made it clear she didn't want my help. And if Garrett had convinced her I was the problem, anything I said would only push her further into his control. I needed proof. Evidence. Something concrete that would make Victoria see the truth. I started by creating a fake social media profile. I know it sounds crazy, but I needed to get close to Garrett without him knowing who I was. I used old photos of a friend from college who'd moved to Australia, changed some details, and created a persona named Michelle, who worked in property management. It took 2 weeks, but I finally managed to connect with him through a real estate networking group online. I crafted messages that seemed professional but friendly, asking questions about the Charlotte market, mentioning I was new to the area. He responded, probably seeing me as a potential business contact. We moved to email, then phone calls. I practiced disguising my voice slightly, keeping it professional and upbeat. Garrett was charming on the phone, funny, attentive. I could see how someone like Victoria would fall for him, but there were moments when his mask slipped. When I asked too many questions, I could hear the irritation beneath the friendly tone. When I mentioned other men in passing, there was a possessiveness in how he redirected the conversation. During our third phone call, I casually mentioned I was engaged. "Congratulations," he said, but his voice had cooled noticeably. "How long have you two been together?" "About 2 years. We're getting married next month, actually." "That's fast. You sure you know him well enough?" There was something sharp in the question. "I think so. We've been pretty open with each other about everything. Our pasts, our families, everything." "That's naive," Garrett said, then caught himself. "I mean, everyone has secrets, things they'd rather not share. It's natural to protect yourself. Even from the person you're marrying, especially from them." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Trust me, Michelle. The less your partner knows about your past mistakes, the better. Some things should stay buried." I felt my skin crawl. After that call, I knew I was dealing with someone dangerous, but I still didn't have anything concrete I could take to Victoria. Then Jennifer called me back. "I've been going through Christina's things again," she said. "There's a storage unit we kept with her belongings. I found her old laptop. I never looked at it because it felt too painful, but I thought maybe there'd be something that could help your sister. Did you find anything?" "Emails, lots of them. Christina documented everything in drafts she never sent. I think she was planning to use them as evidence if she ever got the courage to press charges. There are descriptions of threats he made, times he destroyed her property, incidents where he followed her. It's all here, Sheila. Everything we needed for the original case but couldn't find." My heart raced. Can you send me copies? Already done. Check your email. I opened my laptop and there it was. Months of documentation showing Garrett's pattern of abuse and control. Christina's words painted a picture of a man who slowly tightened his grip until his victim couldn't breathe. She'd written about how he isolated her from friends, convinced her that her family was toxic, monitored her phone and computer. She'd described his rage when she tried to assert any independence. The last entry was dated 2 days before she died. I'm leaving tomorrow. I've been packing while he's at work, just a few things at a time. Jennifer is going to help me. I'm terrified he'll find out before I can get away. He keeps asking me what I'm thinking about, like he can sense something has changed. Last night he told me he'd never let me leave him, that I belonged to him. I'm scared, but I can't live like this anymore. If anything happens to me, I need someone to know that it wasn't an accident. Garrett told me last week that I should be more careful on the stairs, that it would be terrible if I fell. I think he's been planning this. I think he knows I'm going to leave and this is his backup plan. I have to get out. I have to try. I sat there reading Christina's words over and over, my hands shaking. She'd known. She'd seen it coming and she'd still tried to escape. And it had cost her everything. I couldn't let the same thing happen to Victoria. That night, I drove back to Charlotte. I parked outside Victoria's apartment and called her, not caring anymore if she wanted to talk to me. Sheila, I told you. His name is Garrett Sullivan, I interrupted. And 3 years ago, he probably killed his fiancé in Colorado. Her name was Christina. She fell down the stairs 2 days before she was planning to leave him. They couldn't prove he pushed her, but everyone knows he did. Silence on the other end. Vicky, please tell me you know who you're marrying. I know. Her voice was so small I almost didn't hear it. I know who he is, Sheila. I've known for a while. Then why are you still with him? Why are you marrying him? Because he told me if I ever try to leave, he'll kill you. She was crying now. He has photos of you, Sheila. Your address, your work schedule, everything. He said if I don't marry him, if I tell anyone who he really is, he'll make sure you have an accident just like Christina. I can't let that happen. You're all I have left. The world tilted. Everything I thought I understood crashed down around me. Vicky, we need to go to the police. With what evidence? He's too smart for that. Christina tried, remember? She tried everything and look what happened. I can't risk your life, Sheila, I can't. I heard a noise in the background of her call. A door opening. I have to go, Victoria whispered urgently. He just got home. Forget about this. Forget about me. Please, just stay safe. She hung up. I sat in my car outside her building, watching the lights in her apartment, and felt a rage building inside me that I'd never experienced before. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Christina's final diary entry. I saw my sister trapped in an apartment with a murderer, pretending to love him to keep me alive. I saw myself as the reason she couldn't escape. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to let Garrett Sullivan destroy another woman's life. Not my sister's. Not mine. I called into work and told them I needed to take a leave of absence for a family emergency. My boss wasn't happy, but I didn't care anymore. This was more important than any job. Then I called Jennifer back. I need your help, I told her. Victoria knows who Garrett is. He's threatened to kill me if she leaves him. She's marrying him to protect me. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. That's exactly the kind of thing he'd do. Christina tried to protect me too, near the end. He knew the only way to control her was through the people she loved. How do we stop him? We get evidence that even his lawyers can't explain away. We catch him in the act of threatening Victoria or planning violence, and we do it in a way that doesn't give him time to hurt either of you before the police can intervene. How? I've been thinking about this for 3 years. Let me make some calls." Over the next 2 days, Jennifer connected me with people who'd been trying to build a case against Garrett since Christina's death. There was a detective named Patricia who'd worked Christina's case and never believed the accidental death ruling. There was a lawyer named Stephen who'd represented Christina's family in their wrongful death lawsuit that had ultimately been dismissed. There was even a private investigator named Thomas who'd been following Garrett on his own time, convinced he'd eventually make a mistake. We met at a restaurant in Charlotte, all of us crowded into a back booth that felt too small for the weight of what we were planning. "The problem is always the same," Patricia explained, spreading photos across the table. "Garrett is meticulous. He doesn't leave evidence. No texts, no emails, nothing that can be traced back to him. He does everything face-to-face or through methods we can't track." "What about recording him?" I asked. "North Carolina is a one-party consent state," Stephen said. "If Victoria records their conversations without his knowledge, it's legal as evidence. But she'd have to be willing to do it, and from what you've told us, she's too scared to risk it. So we need to catch him threatening her without her cooperation," Thomas said. "That's nearly impossible. What if we make him think she's trying to leave?" I suggested. "What if we set up a situation where he has to show his hand?" Patricia frowned. "That's dangerous. If he feels threatened, he might escalate immediately, strike before we can stop him. But if we control the situation, if we have people watching, ready to intervene..." I looked around the table. "Isn't that our best shot?" They exchanged glances. Finally, Stephen spoke. "It's risky. But you're right. Waiting for him to slip up hasn't worked for 3 years. Maybe it's time to force his hand." We spent hours planning. The key was creating a scenario where Garrett would feel his control slipping, where he'd have to act to maintain his grip on Victoria. But we needed to do it in a way that kept both Victoria and me safe. "I'll talk to Victoria," I said finally. "I'll explain what we're planning. Maybe if she knows we have a safety net, she'll agree to help." "And if she doesn't?" Jennifer asked. "Then I'll do it without her permission, because I'm not watching another woman die to protect me." That evening, I texted Victoria from a burner phone Thomas had given me. I told her to meet me at a park near her apartment, that I had a plan, but we needed to talk somewhere Garrett wouldn't see us together. She showed up looking exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. We sat on a bench far from the parking lot, and I explained everything. The team I'd assembled, Christina's laptop, the evidence Jennifer had found, the plan to trap Garrett. "You don't understand," Victoria said when I finished. "He's always watching. Always. He has tracking software on my phone. He monitors my credit card statements. He knows where I am every minute of every day. Then we use that against him. We make him think he's in control right up until he isn't. Sheila, he'll kill you. The second he realizes what we're doing, he won't get the chance. Patricia will have officers ready to move in. Thomas will be watching. We'll have everything documented, recorded, undeniable." Victoria shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't know him like I do. He's so smart, Sheila. Smarter than all of us. He's planned for everything." "Has he planned for all of us working together? For a detective who's been obsessed with his case for 3 years? For Christina's family refusing to let this go?" She looked at me with something like hope flickering in her eyes. "What do you need me to do?" I explained the plan. In 3 days, Victoria would tell Garrett she needed space, that the wedding was happening too fast, and she wanted to postpone. It would be a small thing, not a full breakup, just enough to make him panic. She'd do it in their apartment, which Thomas would have already equipped with hidden cameras and audio devices. Patricia would have a team stationed nearby, ready to move in the moment Garrett made any threatening move. "He'll explode," Victoria said quietly. "The second I suggest postponing, he'll know something's wrong. That's what we're counting on. We need him to show who he really is while we can prove it. What if he hurts me before the police get there?" I took her hand. I won't let that happen. I promise you, Vicky. None of us will let that happen. She was quiet for a long time, staring at our joined hands. Finally, she looked up at me with a determination I hadn't seen in months. Okay, let's do it. But Sheila, if something goes wrong, if he gets to you, he won't. We're ending this. In 3 days, you're going to be free. I wish I'd known then how wrong I was. The next 72 hours were a nightmare of preparation. Thomas installed micro cameras throughout Victoria's apartment when Garrett was at work. Patricia coordinated with her team, making sure they could respond within seconds if needed. Jennifer flew in from Colorado, insisting she wanted to be there when we finally got justice for her sister. I stayed at a hotel under a fake name, communicating with everyone through burner phones. We couldn't risk Garrett connecting me to any of this. On the morning of the planned confrontation, I was so nervous I couldn't eat. Victoria texted me from the burner phone we'd given her. He just left for work. Thomas is installing the last camera now. This is really happening. You can back out any time, I typed back. Just say the word. No, I'm done being his prisoner. Let's end this. Everything went wrong from the very beginning. Garrett came home early. We'd planned for Victoria to start the conversation at 6 in the evening when Patricia's team was in position and Thomas was monitoring the feeds from his van outside. But Garrett showed up at 4, catching Thomas still inside the apartment installing the final camera in the bedroom. I was with Patricia in an unmarked car 2 blocks away when her radio crackled to life. Thomas's voice, tight with tension. He's here. He's home early. I'm in the bedroom closet. Victoria just let him in. Can you get out? Patricia demanded. Not without him seeing me. I'm stuck. My heart stopped. This wasn't the plan. Thomas was supposed to be safely outside, monitoring from his van. Now he was trapped inside with a killer. Through the radio, we could hear voices. Garrett's smooth, friendly tone. Hey, babe. I managed to finish up early. Thought we could have a nice dinner together. Victoria's response was shakier than I'd hoped. That's great. I actually wanted to talk to you about something. Oh? What's up? We listened as Victoria launched into the script we'd prepared. She was nervous about the wedding. Everything was happening so fast. Maybe they should take a few more months, really make sure they were ready. The silence that followed was deafening. When Garrett finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. All the warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and sharp. What brought this on? Nothing brought it on. I just think... Did someone say something to you? Your sister, maybe? No, I haven't talked to Sheila. This is just me thinking. Don't lie to me, Victoria. The menace in his voice made my skin crawl. You're a terrible liar. You always have been. Who have you been talking to? No one. I just need more time. The sound of something crashing came through the speakers. Victoria screamed. Move in now, Patricia barked into her radio, and suddenly we were racing toward Victoria's building, sirens blaring. Through the audio feed, we heard Garrett's voice, no longer controlled. Did you really think I wouldn't know? I've been monitoring everything, Victoria. Everything. I saw you meet with your sister in the park. I know about the burner phone. I know you're trying to set me up. Please, Garrett, I wasn't... And whoever's hiding in my bedroom closet better come out now before I drag them out. My blood ran cold. He knew Thomas was there. He'd known the whole time. We could hear Thomas emerging, his voice trying to sound calm. I'm a private investigator. There are police on their way. I'd suggest you don't do anything that... The sound of a gunshot exploded through the speakers. I screamed. Patricia was already on the radio. Shots fired! All units respond now! We reached the building in less than 2 minutes, but it felt like hours. Police cars were converging from multiple directions. Patricia and I ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The apartment door was open when we reached it. Thomas was on the floor, bleeding from his shoulder. Victoria was pressed against the far wall, Garrett standing between her and the door with a gun in his hand. "One more step and she dies," Garrett said calmly, as if he were commenting on the weather. "I'll do it, just like I did Christina, except this time everyone will know. I won't even pretend it was an accident." "Garrett, put the gun down," Patricia said, her own weapon drawn. "You're surrounded. There's no way out of this." "There's always a way out." He smiled, and it was the most chilling thing I'd ever seen. "See, I've been planning for something like this. I knew eventually someone would try to trap me, so I made arrangements." "What arrangements?" Patricia demanded. "The kind that involve Sheila's apartment building having a very unfortunate gas leak right about now." He checked his watch casually. "In fact, the explosion should be happening in approximately 3 minutes. Unless, of course, you all leave right now and let me walk out of here with Victoria." My entire world stopped. "You're lying." "Am I?" He pulled out his phone with his free hand, showing us a screen. "One press of this button and the timer stops. Don't press it. And well, I hope you didn't have any pets, Sheila." Patricia's radio crackled. "Dispatch, we've got reports of a gas smell at the Riverside Apartments on Oak Street. Residents are evacuating. Fire department is en route." That was my building, my apartment. "How are we supposed to know you'll actually stop it?" Patricia asked. "You don't. That's the beauty of trust, isn't it?" Garrett's smile widened. "So here's what's going to happen. You're all going to back out of this apartment. Victoria and I are going to walk out together, get in my car, and drive away. Once we're safely gone, I'll cancel the timer. Everyone lives. Or you can try to be heroes, and you can explain to all those families why you let their loved ones die." I looked at Patricia, saw the calculation in her eyes. She was trying to figure out if he was bluffing, if there was any way to stop him without risking dozens of lives. But I knew he wasn't bluffing. This was exactly the kind of backup plan a man like Garrett would have. He'd learned from Christina's death that he needed insurance, a way to guarantee his freedom. "Patricia," I said quietly, "we have to let him go. Sheila, we have to. You know we do." For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then Patricia slowly lowered her weapon. Everyone fall back. Let them through. Garrett's smile was triumphant as he grabbed Victoria's arm and pulled her toward the door. She looked at me as they passed, her eyes full of terror and apology. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. Then they were gone, disappearing down the hallway with Garrett's gun pressed against her back. Patricia was already on her radio, coordinating with the bomb squad, trying to evacuate my building. I stood frozen, watching paramedics rush in to help Thomas, understanding that we'd failed. We'd tried to trap a killer, and instead we'd given him exactly what he wanted. No, worse than that. We'd given him a hostage and a head start. And now my sister was alone with a man who'd already killed once and had just proven he was willing to do it again. The bomb squad found the device in my apartment 40 minutes later. It was sophisticated, triggered by a cell phone signal just like Garrett had said. If he hadn't sent the cancel code, it would have taken out 3 floors of the building. "He's done this before," the bomb tech told Patricia. "This isn't something you rig up in a day. This took planning, skill. He's been ready for this exact scenario." I sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket even though I wasn't cold, watching them carry evidence bags out of my destroyed home. Everything I owned was now a crime scene, but I couldn't bring myself to care about any of it. My sister was out there somewhere with a murderer, and it was my fault. Patricia sat down next to me. "We've got an APB out. His face is on every news station. He can't hide for long." "You don't know him like I do," I said, echoing Victoria's words from days ago. "He's planned for everything. The phone he used to cancel the bomb timer is giving us a location. Well, It was. He dumped it about 20 miles outside Charlotte. We're tracking where he went from there. He'll have another car waiting, another phone, another identity probably. I looked at her. Christina's family spent years trying to catch him, and he was always one step ahead. What makes you think this time will be different? Because this time he's running. Running means mistakes. He's not in control anymore, and that's when men like him slip up. I wanted to believe her, but I kept thinking about Victoria's face as Garrett dragged her out of that apartment. The fear, the resignation, like she'd known all along it would end this way. My phone rang. An unknown number. "Don't answer it," Patricia said immediately. But I knew who it was. I pressed accept and put it on speaker. "Hello, Sheila." Garrett's voice was calm, almost friendly. "I hope you're not too upset about your apartment. I really didn't want it to come to that." "Where's my sister?" "She's right here. She's fine. A little shaken up, but fine. Would you like to talk to her?" There was a rustling sound, then Victoria's voice, small and scared. "Sheila, I'm okay. Don't worry about me." "Vicky, see?" Garrett came back on the line. "She's perfectly safe, for now. Whether she stays that way depends entirely on you." Patricia was already signaling to her tech team, trying to trace the call. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want you to understand something. You tried to trap me, to ruin my life. So now, I'm going to ruin yours. Every day for the rest of your life, you're going to wake up and wonder if today is the day I hurt your sister. You'll never know where we are. Never know if she's safe. You'll live with that fear forever, just like Christina's family lives with their grief." "Or," I said, because there had to be an or. Men like Garrett always wanted something. "Or you confess. You go on television and tell everyone that you made up the entire story about me, that you were jealous of Victoria's happiness and tried to sabotage her wedding. You admit that you planted evidence, coerced witnesses, and orchestrated this whole thing. You destroy your own credibility so thoroughly that no one will ever believe anything you say about me again. And if I do that, then I let Victoria go. She comes back to you, safe and sound. I disappear, and you never hear from me again. But the price is your reputation, your career, your credibility. You become the villain in this story. That's the trade." I looked at Patricia, saw her shaking her head vigorously. If I confessed, if I discredited everything we'd found, Garrett would be untouchable. He could kill Victoria and walk away clean, just like he had with Christina. "I need time to think about it," I said. "You have 24 hours. I'll call back tomorrow at this exact time. Have your answer ready. And Sheila, don't bother trying to trace this call. I'm nowhere near where your police friends think I am." He hung up. Patricia immediately turned to her tech team. "Tell me you got something." The call bounced through 6 different towers. Best we can tell, he's somewhere in South Carolina, but he's right. It could be a relay. He might not actually be there. Expand the search to South Carolina. Contact their state police. I want roadblocks, security footage from every gas station and rest stop. He's got to stop eventually. But as the hours passed and the search expanded, I realized Garrett had been telling the truth. He'd planned for this. He had resources, safe houses, everything he needed to disappear with Victoria. Jennifer arrived at the police station around midnight. She looked at me with such understanding in her eyes that I almost broke down. "This is exactly what happened with Christina," she said quietly. "He isolated her, threatened people she loved, made her feel like she had no choice but to stay. And when she finally tried to fight back, when she tried to gather evidence, she trailed off. I can't let it happen again. I won't." "What can we do? He's got Victoria and we have no idea where they are." Jennifer pulled out a folder from her bag. "After Christina died, I became obsessed with Garrett. I hired investigators, dug into his past, followed every lead. I found something that the police never did." She spread photos across the table. They showed a small cabin in the mountains, isolated and remote. Garrett's grandfather owned this place. It's been in his family for decades. After Christina died, I had someone check it out. It looked abandoned, but there were signs someone had been there recently. Fresh tire tracks. Supplies inside that shouldn't have been there if the place was truly empty. Patricia leaned forward. "You think that's where he'd go?" "I think it's where he'd take Victoria. It's remote enough that no one would hear her scream. It's off the grid, no paper trail, and it's the one place I don't think he knows we know about." "Where is it?" "About 3 hours from here, up in the mountains near Asheville." Patricia was already pulling up maps on her computer, coordinating with local law enforcement. But I felt something settle in my chest. This was it. This was how we were going to find my sister. "I'm coming with you," I said. "Absolutely not. This is a police operation. That's my sister up there. I'm coming." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but Jennifer spoke up. "She has a right to be there. After everything she's been through, everything she's risked. Let her come." Finally, Patricia nodded. "Fine, but you stay in the car. You don't approach until we've secured the scene. Understood?" I agreed, even though I knew I was lying. When we found that cabin, when we found Victoria, nothing was going to keep me away. We left for the mountains at 3 a.m. Patricia drove the lead car with me in the passenger seat. Jennifer rode with 2 other officers in the vehicle behind us. The plan was simple. Approach quietly, assess the situation, and move in only when we were certain Victoria was inside and could be extracted safely. The drive took longer than 3 hours because we had to kill our lights and navigate the last few miles using night vision. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that wound through dense forest. By the time we arrived, the sky was just starting to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Patricia parked a quarter-mile from the cabin. Through binoculars, we could see a black SUV parked outside. Lights were on inside the cabin. "That's his vehicle," Patricia confirmed, checking the license plate against her database. "He's here." My hands were shaking. Victoria was inside that cabin with a murderer, and I was sitting in a car doing nothing. "Tactical team is 2 minutes out," Patricia said into her radio. "We wait for them, then we move." But 2 minutes felt like forever. I watched the cabin through the binoculars, looking for any sign of movement. Then I saw her. Victoria appeared in one of the windows. Her hands were tied in front of her. She was crying. I didn't think. I just moved. I was out of the car and running toward the cabin before Patricia could stop me. I heard her yelling behind me, heard footsteps as officers gave chase, but I didn't care. My sister needed me. I reached the cabin and tried the front door. Locked. I ran around to the side and found a window. Through it, I could see into what looked like a living room. Garrett was there, pacing back and forth with his phone in his hand. Victoria was tied to a chair, her face streaked with tears. I picked up a rock and smashed the window. Everything happened at once. Garrett spun toward the sound, his hand reaching for something in his jacket. I was already climbing through the window, cutting my arms on the broken glass, but not feeling it. Patricia and the other officers were shouting, converging on the cabin from multiple directions. I landed inside just as Garrett pulled out his gun. "Sheila, don't!" Victoria screamed. But I was already moving toward her, putting myself between her and Garrett. "You want to shoot someone? Shoot me. But you're not touching my sister again." Garrett's face twisted with rage. "You stupid girl. You've ruined everything. Everything I built. Everything I planned. For what? For her? She's not worth it. Neither of you are worth it. Then let her go. This is between you and me now." "No." His voice was cold, final. "If I can't have her, if I can't have the life I wanted, then no one gets anything. I'll kill you both and then myself. At least then it ends on my terms. The front door exploded inward as Patricia and her team breached it. "Drop the weapon. Drop it now." Garrett swung his gun toward the officers. Time seemed to slow down. I saw his finger tightening on the trigger. Saw Patricia starting to fire back. Saw Victoria struggling against her restraints, trying to move the chair, trying to get to me. I threw myself at Garrett. We went down together in a tangle of limbs. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the small space. I felt something hot and sharp across my side, but I held on, grabbing his wrist, slamming his hand against the floor until the gun skittered away. Then Patricia was there, pulling me off him, other officers swarming in to restrain him. Someone was cutting Victoria's restraints. Someone else was pressing something against my side where blood was soaking through my shirt. "Ambulance is on the way," Patricia said, her face swimming in and out of focus. "Sheila, stay with me. Stay awake." But I was looking past her, looking at Victoria, who was stumbling toward me, free now, reaching for me with shaking hands. "You came," she sobbed. "You came for me. Always," I managed to say before everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital room with sunshine streaming through the window. Victoria was asleep in a chair next to my bed, her hand clasped around mine. My side ached where the bullet had grazed me. The doctor would later tell me I was lucky. 2 inches to the left, and it would have been much more serious. As it was, I had stitches and pain medication and orders to rest for several weeks. But I was alive. Victoria was alive. And Garrett was in custody, facing charges for kidnapping, attempted murder, and a reopened investigation into Christina's death. Victoria stirred, opening her eyes. When she saw I was awake, she burst into tears. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry for everything, for pushing you away, for not telling you the truth sooner, for putting you in danger." "Stop." I squeezed her hand. "You were trying to protect me. I understand that now. I should have trusted you. Should have known you'd find a way to help me." Victoria stayed with me in that hospital room for 3 days. Jennifer visited every afternoon, bringing updates on the case. The evidence from Christina's laptop, combined with the recordings from Victoria's apartment and witness testimony about the kidnapping, had created an airtight case against Garrett. "The prosecutor is confident," Jennifer told us on the 3rd day. "Between Christina's case and what he did to Victoria, he's looking at life in prison. Minimum." "What about the explosion at my apartment?" I asked. "Terrorism charges on top of everything else. They found evidence he'd been planning multiple scenarios. He had explosives stashed in 3 different locations, all rigged to cell phone triggers. This wasn't just about controlling Victoria. He'd been preparing for war. I thought about Christina's final diary entry, about how she'd known something was wrong but had tried to leave anyway. "She would have been glad," I said. "Christina. She would have been glad he finally got caught." Jennifer nodded, her eyes wet. "She would have been proud of you both, of what you did." After Jennifer left, Victoria sat down on the edge of my bed. "What happens now?" she asked. "After all this, after everything that happened, how do we just go back to normal life?" "We don't," I said. "We build a new normal, one where we're both free." The trial took 6 months to start. During that time, Victoria moved in with me while I recovered, and while we both tried to piece our lives back together. She quit her job in Charlotte and found work at a hotel in Raleigh. We went to therapy, both separately and together, working through the trauma of what we'd experienced. The therapist helped us understand something important. What Garrett had done to us wasn't our fault. He'd been a predator who'd chosen his victims carefully, who'd exploited their vulnerabilities and fears. Victoria had been trying to protect me. I'd been trying to save her. Neither of us had done anything wrong. The day of the trial, we sat in the courtroom together. Garrett was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. He looked smaller somehow, less threatening than he had in that cabin. Prison had stripped away his veneer of charm and control. When his eyes met mine across the courtroom, I didn't look away. I held his gaze and let him see that I wasn't afraid anymore, that he'd lost. The prosecution presented their case over 2 weeks. They brought in Christina's family, who testified about the abuse she'd suffered. They brought in experts who analyzed the evidence from her laptop, showing a clear pattern of escalating control and violence. They played the recordings from Victoria's apartment, letting the jury hear Garrett's threats in his own voice. Patricia testified about the standoff at the cabin, about how Garrett had been willing to kill all of us rather than face justice. Then it was Victoria's turn to take the stand. I watched my sister walk to the witness box, her head held high despite the trembling in her hands. She'd been dreading this moment for months, afraid of having to face Garrett again, afraid of reliving everything she'd endured. But when she started speaking, her voice was steady. She told them everything. How Garrett had seemed charming at first, attentive and loving. How slowly, almost imperceptibly, he'd started isolating her from friends and family. How he'd installed tracking software on her phone, monitored her spending, questioned every moment she wasn't with him. She told them about the day she'd discovered who he really was, when she'd stumbled across old news articles about Christina's death. About how she'd tried to leave, and he'd shown her photos of me, my apartment, my daily routine, about the threats he'd made. He told me he'd make it look like an accident, Victoria said, her voice breaking slightly. Just like he did with Christina. He said everyone would think my sister just had bad luck, maybe that it ran in our family. And I believed him. Because I'd seen what he was capable of. I'd seen the emptiness in his eyes when he talked about Christina. He didn't feel guilty. He felt proud. The jury listened in horrified silence. When Victoria finished testifying, she walked back to her seat next to me. I took her hand and held it tight. Garrett's defense tried to paint him as the victim. They suggested that Victoria and I had conspired to frame him, that we'd invented evidence and manipulated witnesses. They claimed the recordings had been doctored, that Christina's laptop had been tampered with, but no one believed them. The evidence was too overwhelming, too consistent, too damning. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, I felt something release in my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Victoria sagged against me, crying tears of relief and exhaustion. Garrett showed no reaction. He just sat there, staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched tight. At sentencing 3 weeks later, the judge gave him life in prison without the possibility of parole. "You are a danger to society," the judge said. "You have shown no remorse, no recognition of the harm you've caused. You will spend the rest of your life behind bars, and that is exactly what you deserve." 6 months after the sentencing, Victoria and I stood outside a coffee shop in Raleigh, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. We'd started a tradition of meeting for coffee every Sunday morning, just the two of us, reconnecting after years of letting our relationship slip away. "I got a call yesterday," Victoria said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "From a woman in Virginia. Her sister is dating someone she's worried about. She said she saw our story on the news and wanted advice." "What did you tell her?" "That she should trust her instincts. That if something feels wrong, it probably is. And that she shouldn't wait to get help." I smiled. "You thinking about doing more of that? Helping other people?" "Maybe. Jennifer and I have been talking about starting something. A support network for people in situations like mine. People being controlled or isolated by partners. We could share resources, connect them with legal help, provide a safe space to talk." "I think that's a wonderful idea." Victoria looked at me over her coffee cup. "Would you want to help? You were the one who figured out how to fight back, how to gather evidence. You could teach people how to protect themselves." I thought about it. About Christina, who'd tried to document her abuse but hadn't survived long enough to use that evidence. About Victoria, who'd been so terrified she'd almost married her abuser. About all the other people out there right now, trapped in similar situations, thinking they had no way out. "Yeah," I said, "I'd like that." We spent the rest of that morning planning. By the time we finished our coffee, we had the outline of what would eventually become the Christina Project, named in honor of the woman whose death had started this whole chain of events. Jennifer joined us in the effort. Together, the three of us built something real. We created a website with resources for recognizing abuse and gathering evidence safely. We partnered with lawyers who could provide pro bono consultations. We trained volunteers to staff a hotline for people who needed immediate support. Patricia helped us connect with law enforcement agencies across the state, teaching them how to handle cases like Victoria's more effectively. Thomas, who'd recovered from his gunshot wound, volunteered his services as an investigator for cases where people needed help tracking abusive partners. Within a year, we'd helped 23 people escape dangerous relationships. Some of them were women like Victoria, engaged to men who'd hidden their true natures. Others were in marriages that had turned toxic. A few were men escaping female abusers, or people in same-sex relationships dealing with partners who'd become controlling. Each story was different, but they all had the same core. Someone who felt trapped, isolated, convinced they had no way out. And each time we helped someone escape, I thought about how close Victoria and I had come to losing each other. My apartment had been repaired and I'd moved back in, though I'd changed the locks and installed a security system that would make a bank vault jealous. Victoria eventually moved into her own place, a small house with a garden where she could grow flowers. She was dating again, cautiously, taking her time to really know people before letting them get close. I'd gone back to my job at Bright Rise Systems, though now I worked part-time so I could dedicate more hours to the Christina Project. My boss had been incredibly supportive, even donating company resources to help us build our website and database. The scars from that day in the cabin had faded to thin white lines on my arms and side. They reminded me that I'd been willing to risk everything for my sister, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to give up on the people you love. 2 years after Garrett's sentencing, Victoria and I received a letter from Patricia. She'd been promoted to lieutenant, partly due to her work on Garrett's case, but more importantly, she'd used her new position to establish a task force specifically dedicated to investigating suspicious deaths of women, particularly those involving partners with histories of controlling behavior. "Because of what you two did," she wrote, "we're looking at cold cases differently now. We're finding patterns we missed before. Just last month, we reopened 3 cases that had been ruled accidents. In all 3, the women had partners who showed signs of the same kind of control Garrett exhibited. We might finally get justice for their families." I read that letter to Victoria over Sunday morning coffee, and we both cried. Not from sadness, but from the knowledge that something good had come from all the pain we'd endured. Garrett Sullivan spent his days in a maximum security prison where his charm and manipulation tactics meant nothing behind bars. Other inmates knew who he was and what he'd done. His reputation as a killer of women made him a target. He lived in constant fear, isolated in protective custody, experiencing a fraction of the terror he'd inflicted on his victims. Appeals were filed and rejected. His name became synonymous with calculated evil. The life he'd so carefully constructed, the control he'd so viciously maintained, was reduced to a 6x8 cell where he would spend every remaining day until death. Victoria eventually married a kind man she met through a mutual friend, someone patient who understood her past and never made her feel afraid. She'd learned to recognize the warning signs, to trust her instincts, to never let anyone make her feel small again. They were happy together, building a life based on honesty and respect. As for me, I still think about that moment in the cabin when I threw myself at Garrett, when I chose my sister over my own safety. I'd do it again in a heartbeat, because that's what love is. Not the controlling, possessive thing Garrett called love, but the real thing, the kind that makes you brave, the kind that sets people free. And that's a lesson worth fighting for, worth sharing, worth building a life around. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't just defeating your enemy. It's taking the worst thing they ever did and transforming it into something that helps others survive.